So I'm going to be installing an artificial turf around here, around my building. So you can see everywhere there's the grass here. It's kind of a mess, weeds and everything. You can see it's kind of just an outline of it, but that's one way we try to do is install it all through here. So first off, I'm gonna have to clean all this out. I need a good edge, but I got these metal edging. So I need to install that all around the perimeter, anywhere where the pool deck. First task is gonna be extract all this weeds and grass and everything, dig down to the right level. So I need a couple different layers, and I'll work on those, and then before I can actually do the install. So as I mentioned, the first thing I'm doing here is just clearing out all the weeds, and then I'm going to be kind of doing it at the same time, just digging down. This one's pretty easy. Sometimes I'll do it with a shovel. This is kind of topsoil, so it's a little bit easier. I like just kind of scrape off the top just so I'm not going down too far. And then I'll once I get the edging in, then I'll get a better idea how deep it is. So you see it's just pretty, it's quite a bit of work, especially when you get dense grass. As you get towards the front there, it gets a lot more, and you're trying to dig down. Usually you have to go down to like at least 2 or 3 inches. So I'm just doing that and kind of moving other rocks and everything, just kind of getting a basic idea. And then I'm putting in this metal edging. As I mentioned, the turf needs, or then the base needs something to press against so that it's not just, flattening out. So just kind of starting this off using the sledgehammer here. This is just basic. I think that you can say like Wonderboard and different things like this. I wanted something really sturdy, so I went with this metal edging. And then just had to kind of straighten it out, like I said, and get it down in so that it was for the other edge, for the outside that I'm not using, and then I'll work on it, the deeper side. And of course, I had so many curves in this project, so I'm having to work on this curve here a little bit, just trying to get the right edge here, just so because I want it to be as flush as I can to the concrete, and then just had to bring the angle grinder and just cut this off. So again, I'm just trying to match that curve just to make it look a little bit nicer. And then just cut this off. So it's pretty easy. These pieces, I think I got them like Home Depot or something. They have like an overlap laying on the edge, and then there's a little stake that goes in. So just kind of pre-bending it a little bit here. Not much to this. The majority of it was full pieces, so I could do that. So this is, again, just forming it around here, just trying to keep it somewhat straight, not bending it too much. So, this is the final product. So you just start wanting to look at, how your edges work. So you can see I made it level with the concrete there, and to move the rocks back and just get again, better idea how far I need to go down, because the turf is actually going to go flush with your edge. So whatever base material you put down, anything, so I'm just kind of showing it right here, how I've put just the dirt up here just to kind of simulate that's where the level would be, so that it sits like this, and then it looks nice so that the water will run right off, and you'll tuck in the edges, but that's, how it looks. And then kind of take a look at, I needed the concrete here, how far up I want it to go. So just kind of looking, so it's actually going to be higher on the base there, and it's going to slope away from the building. And then just kind of looking at this, well, here's the pool deck area. This is the same thing. It's going to be flush so that the water rolls off of that edge and then down away from the turf, so it's not just sitting there. And here it is after I dug it down deep where I want. Like I said, I got about 3 inches down. I got all around, got all the edging in here. And so there's an edge on both sides. So either whether it's concrete or the fence or that metal edging that I put in, that's going to be the support for the base material for the turf. And then the next thing you want to do is put weed block down. So this is pretty simple. I got some thicker material. You don't really need, unless you got like really weeds or like vines or anything, that most of them aren't going to come up. It's mostly just going to be, but it's just I actually kind of like this because it helps the water, once it hits this material, kind of roll off a little bit. The prelude here, I actually end up making a mistake a little bit later on, or I realized, but this material is good for that. And so you kind of see, it's most of the time it's pretty easy. You don't have to be really specific with this or really precise. You're just trying to get down. I like to go up the edges a little bit, because that's kind of where weeds grow, along the edges. So anything where it's kind of penetrating from one, like underneath that fence or anything like that. That's all I'm really doing, is just marking this down. If you luck out, you can, you don't have to cut it too much, but mine was just a little bit wider this area than these. I think this was like a 4-foot piece, so I had to just kind of add a little bit of anything, trim it around the sides. Again, just go up the edges a little bit anywhere where you need to. And then I think I overlapped like 6 inches or so and just kind of reused those stakes just to kind of hold it down between the pieces that are overlapping. And so it's really just kind of a repeat. Hopefully you don't have to deal with something. I had like this where they poured the concrete for the building. It spilled over here, or was pretty deep, and so I had to get the chisel out and break it up a bit, just because I knew that I would have problems once I'm trying to nail down the turf here. So I just kind of broke that up, just so I'd have that, not have to deal with that problem, because you have to nail the turf down everywhere along the edges, and so if it's if I had concrete there, I wouldn't be able to do that. So just kind of fix that a little bit. And then more working around, you'll start seeing the pain here. Where everywhere there's curves, it just causes problems. Just not problems, but just extra work. So just overlapping the areas again, just that piece between the curve and where the finished material was here. So it went through, got all that done, laid out. This was pretty, not really that difficult. I didn't put any in the middle just because I already had grout. And then I got all my stone dust delivered. This is what I'm going to use as the base material. These were 2,000-pound bags, so I've got quite a bit of work here. But you can see it's a dust. It's almost like talc, and then when it compresses really well. So I thought that's why I would decided to use that. So it's just really just scooping into the bucket and dropping it off, over and over, repeat for as much as you need. Again, I had to calculate, because for what I wanted about a little over 2 inches deep. So that's all I was doing here was, again, I'm going to rent the actual compactor, but I'm just starting off with a thin base layer, and that's why I usually found is better is just don't try to compact everything all at once, like all several inches. Just do it in multiple layers, and you end up with a better compaction and less settling at the end. So I'm really just kind of trying to form it here. That's what I'm doing here. Again, just a thin layer, just kind of working around, getting it up, and I'm not really worried about the grading yet, just because again I'm just trying to get this base layer in. And so I got this. I went through and got it all. I think this was like 2 inches or so, 1.5 inches or so. When I finally worked through this, I think it took me several hours to do this, because I'm actually going to go up on the edge a little bit higher. But this is again just kind of starting off quickly here, just to see how much I need to do, kind of work through. I've never worked with this material, but I need to go everywhere. And here's where the problem started. So I did that, and then that night it rained really hard. And what I didn't realize is that this stone dust really soaks up water if you don't have good drainage. And I have all clay, and the pool runs towards it, the fence runs towards it. And so what happened is the water got in there and just soaked it. And there was nowhere for the water to go, so it's just pooling inside there. So I actually had to spend a lot of time pulling this out, and then I ended up putting a drain underneath. I just bit the bullet here. So there's a link here, or I'll put up here where I actually pulled all, after I did this, because I won't show in this video, where I put a French drain all in the middle here around all 4 sides. But I just spent a lot of time pulling all this out. And then here's kind of just a preview of what I had to do. Drain all around, like I said, this French drain, that'll help drain any heavy rains like this, and I had to grade it all into the middle. But again, it'll be another video where I did this, because this was a whole separate week of work where I had to delay the project. But it's draining here and then draining into and then away from the yard. But this was quite a bit of work. But anyways, back to kind of showing what I did. So what I had to do as well was, instead of just putting that stone dust down, is put some gravel down. I think put like 1 inch or 2 of that, so that any water that gets through will at least be able to drain towards the French drain. So this is kind of going backwards a little bit. After I got the French drain in, put this gravel down, then I started working on the stone dust on top of this. You'll see piles everywhere, just because I didn't have enough room to move everything, so I had to do it in little sections. But then here I am back, going back, at least from where I cut off in the previous section. So I got the gravel down, and now I'm compacting the stone dust. So back in time, a day wasted. But anyways, I made this block here, because I know how high I wanted it to be, about 2 inches down the final level, because the grass, or that artificial turf, is like 1 5/8 inches. So I wanted just like about 1/2 inch, 3/8 or so, just kind of so you can kind of see the edge of the the concrete just to get, so I'm forming it here or just getting that. And then this is where I'm doing like loose grading so that it's grading away from the concrete in the building towards that edge so that it'll run off a little bit. And then I'm using this piece just kind of like a scree like you do in concrete, where you just kind of run along. So I have the edge on the top where I know how high I want it, and then that edge on the bottom, and I'm just kind of making it smooth because anything you do, any inconsistencies, not little ones, but they'll show up in the final product under the turf. And then I'm back working on the bigger areas, and you can see it's actually flush up against the concrete. So that's what you're trying to accomplish there. And I actually have some drains in here, and that's what you'll see, those little extensions that are extended up there that are going to go through that'll cut later. But again, I'm just kind of forming it because there's a small area. So I'm just doing that with the tamper because I rented this from Home Depot. And so I'm going to use this for the bigger areas just so I get a good compaction. And this thing was really heavy. So if you rent this, get ready to have either a helper or, expect a lot, because I think this one's like, it's the smaller one and it was still like 175 pounds. And it's a bit of a beast here. I didn't realize this is my first time using it, so I wasn't getting the water right, so you should have some water. This one had a tank so you can use water. Sometimes it helps to kind of spray it beforehand, but you just want it helps in the compaction, but also keeps this dust from going everywhere. And just trying to figure out how to use this. This is kind of funny watching myself do this, but I didn't really, it vibrates, but it only goes forward, so it's really hard to, so I was trying to pull it as it's vibrating and, struggling with it. But I finally got it, somewhat working. It was helpful in these big areas instead of having to try to compact it with that little hand tamper. But it's a lot of work here. And then I realized I needed to water it. So that's what I was doing, because that tank wasn't working as well as I thought. And I think this was my third layer that I did here. And then I put too much water on. That's my, the vibrating plate here, it's good, but it's when it's wet or it's a little bit too soggy or going uphill, it's a little bit of struggle. So I'm actually having to push it as it's going. Again, I put too much water on it. And then I'm having to kind of work the throttle here back and forth, use it so it doesn't take off on me and, hit things I'm not expecting. Like I just hit the camera right there. But it was a bit of a workout. I think it was like 90 degrees this day. So I was doing a lot, but you can see how much it's compacting it here. Again, I'm trying to get somewhat to the final level, but not perfect. And then I go back with the hand tamper and just kind of to work on the grading and getting it completely smoothed out, and then working it. I'm actually grade down from each side towards the drains. And then here's where I got the carpet or the turf delivered. The daughter's having fun playing with it, trying to get it open. But this is pretty heavy. I think this was like 250 pounds because I got like 32 feet of it and it's 15 feet wide. But I got it and just unrolled it just to I just wanted to measure it, make sure I got exactly what I ordered. I had the right distance before I start cutting it. But it's a lot. And so I worked this out beforehand because I knew it was going to be very heavy, that I would have to cut it into pieces. I'm trying to minimize the amount of waste and the amount of minimize the number of seams I have, but also not too many so that when you're walking on the seams or anything, and having any problems. But it's kind of interesting because it actually lays this one way, and you can see how different the color is. So it's really like this way when the grains are facing away from you, and you can see it change color as I look towards where the grains of the blades are moving toward you. So you're just going to keep that in mind. So the way you lay it, depending on how you want it, this is a little exaggerated because it's out in the full sun, but depending on what you have, you can see it going back and forth in this light to dark gray or green, sorry. So I'm making the first cut here. So this is, I was mentioning, I'm going to cut it up. I'm trying to make it into a manageable piece because I know it's so heavy. But then, so what I ended up doing is cutting off, some portion of. So I'm going to have one large side that goes down the side, and then a cutout around the building, so that I can have that piece. Will be cut out, but it'll fit around the building. I'll have one continuous piece without a seam to give it a little more strength that I thought. So you just use chalk line. And you always want to cut on the back. You don't want to cut from the front and cut the blades up and have a gap. So this is all I'm doing. I just slit that edge. There's like a side. I guess it helps. That's part of the manufacturing that doesn't have actually have blades on there, but it helps to use that. So I just use that as to hold my chalk line, and then it's really just kind of like any other carpet, anything. I've never really done carpet, but like drywall, anything like that. Just use a straight edge, and then cut down. Don't cut too far where you're cutting the blades, but just enough where you want to get through that backer area. So this is my first cut, and I'm going to use this piece later on, but I'm going to use again this one big piece. It's like 24 feet, I think, because I go all the way down the side, and then I have to adjust for the curves and everything. And I'm overlaying it by like a couple inches, just so I don't have to, or I don't have to, so I don't make any mistakes. So here I'm actually cutting in for the building, and then I'm adding for any edges. I added like 3 inches, so on the side of the building, on the side of the fence. So because it's hard to get perfect squares, and so you want to be able to have it run up a little bit, and so you do the final cut when you actually get it. And I'll show you, it's a little bit easier to kind of see here. And I actually labeled as well any of the pieces, or the pieces, just so I would remember, because I'm actually putting it one way, and then you have to cut it on the underneath side, so it's a little bit difficult to keep. So I finished the first cut. So this is going to be facing the building. This is the cutout for the building here. That's going to be the backside, the fence over that way, and then this curry path next to the river rocks. You can see I screwed up my cut over here. Had it turned around, and so I ended up with a cut here. I didn't look like I didn't go all the way through, but I'm just gonna have to put a seam into this. I hope it works out. And then here's where I rolled it. I rolled it up, and then kind of worked it, or brought it into the back. You can see it's still, this is probably still like 100, at least 100 pounds, maybe 120 pounds. But I rolled it up just so it would be the easiest way to get this. Again, it's difficult, and I have to waste a lot just because most of what I'm doing is really going around the building. But again, I wanted to have a full piece here without any seams, because I think this is going to be the place that's going to be walked on the most. So again, you can see I'm just kind of working it in there. It's a little hard, especially with one person here. And also because it's, as I mentioned, bigger than the area it's going in, just because I want a little bit of overlap so I can have the ability to trim it. And I got a weird little cutout right there as well, where the concrete is like 3 inches longer, just from the building for the open area. But I accounted for all that. So again, I'm just kind of moving this in here, working it into the area, just so I can at least make sure it's correct. And there's that area where I think I made that mistake, but that was not too bad of a seam. So again, just kind of working it in here slowly. It was heavy, but it was not too bad. So you can see here, that's why I mentioned that on the fence. So actually you can see right the fence here, right at the edge here is where, just because it's not square, is where it lined up. I got it the best just to line up there, but anywhere closer, it's actually running up the edge. So this is what I meant, where it instead of undercutting and having a problem, just overcut it. So this is where I'm going to start trimming it a little bit here. So it's easiest, or you really need to do it, is just nail it, get down. And I'll show some later examples of it. These are like 6-inch nails. There's a lot you have to put in here, but I'm just nailing it down, just so I can kind of stretch it out a little bit, and also make these cuts without it moving around too much, or really at all. You don't want it to move. And so what you want to do is overlap the cut, or you don't want to cut it really tight, because what you're going to do later on is, once you finished it and get it all nailed down, is you actually tuck in the edge, and what that gives you is kind of sort of rolls it over so that you don't see the edge that you cut. So that's really all I'm doing here. So I found this easiest is just gonna move back and just be, it's tedious, but again, I got this carpet kicker, and just kind of using it to tighten. I didn't have to tighten too much, just because it's kind of a hot day, and there's, I'm gonna have wide ranges compared to winter, but I wanted to stretch it out so that there's no folds or anything in it. But again, I was only doing like 3 inches at a time, and this is really super tedious work. But I just want to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. So just kind of testing it each time, make sure you're not cutting it too short, because once you cut it too short, you're done here. Other things I had to do that was kind of a little bit harder is this drain. Normally I wouldn't cut from the top, but it wasn't really a good way to cut from the bottom, obviously, because I can't get underneath it. And then the drain that goes on top of it has a little bit of a flange, so it's going to cover up. And you don't want to cut from the top because you'll be cutting blades, and then it'll be kind of visible. So the next thing I had to do was, again, I extended those drains straight up just with some pieces. So I'm cutting it with a Dremel tool here. I cut it about 1/2 inch down just because that's just what I had to do. And the drain had a little extension that fits inside of that. And then that's what's going to push inside of that. So got it all worked here. I got most of the dust out, and you can see, like I mentioned, that drain has a little bit of a flange on it. And like anything, when you're pushing down, you don't want to pull the blades down because then it's, you get obvious looking divots. I'm not pulling up the bottom, but I'm just making sure none of the blades of grass are getting stuck under there, so it looks a little bit more natural. And I haven't put down any of those nails yet because I'm still trying to get it all, the edge done. And here's where I'm going down the other edge and what I found was the best way, especially on an open one, makes it a little bit easier, or really any of these curved edges, anything like that, is again, just work 2-3 inches at a time, just 2 or 3 inches cut, and then just keep it folded back and keep it parallel to what you're cutting. That way you can lay it down and you can kind of cut and understand, know how much you have to do without undercutting it. And again, I'm overlaying it, or I'm cutting it about 1/4 inch or so longer than the edge, because that edge, especially this where it's going to be visible, is going to be tucked in at the end, that just so you can't see it. And then here's just kind of a view of the progress so far. I've got here's my first seam I've got here. This one will get cleaned up, but this is laying in that edge. You can see this is my other piece, that one that I cut off. This was like 7-foot edge. But you can see that I'm wasting a lot, but I have to just because there's so many curves. You can see some of the nails I've started in there as well. Here's a little piece here where I had to got another seams that I had to put in here, and I'm overlaying it over the edge just so again I can cut it and don't have to try to fit it in perfectly. And then this is the way you lay the edge. They recommend like every 6 inches, but just with this curve, when I was doing 6 inches, it was a little bit too much, so I ended up doing like 4 inches. And so what I was doing was laying them or using the tape measure to lay them every foot, and then I just put 2 in there, just kind of that way I can just visually see. I don't have to measure every 4 inches, and I found this wasn't too bad this way. But you're gonna, I said, you might be able to get away with 6 inches, but it wasn't working correctly for me, or just it didn't look right. And then this is the pain here where you have to, when you nail these down, you don't want to nail just straight down because you might pull some of the blades in, or you will pull some of the blades in, and then it'll be obvious divots. So what you're going to use is a nail or something else. That's easiest. I found the easiest with a nail is just pull the blades back so that there's an open area, and then you can get the nail straight down into it, and just kind of make sure there's no blades again tucked down there. And then this is where like I mentioned, I'm tucking in the edge. I just happen to have this piece from that carpet. I think I switched to that little metal piece, that spike that's right next to it. But for some of the bigger areas, it wasn't too bad. And so you see what you're doing is you're tucking it once it's actually tightening it, pulling it down there, and then pulling those blades over like this. So you can no longer see that cut edge and that black underlayment material here. So you just have to do this everywhere around. And you can see this is more tedious stuff. It's all like this. It's kind of a pain, but this is what you have to do. So here's kind of I've got most of it done here, and then what I'm doing is working on these seams. So you have to glue them down, and I had to dry. It was wet and it had rained, so I was just kind of opening them up and drying them out a little bit here before I glued it down. But I'll work on that a little bit. And then the other tedious part here was all in between these concrete pavers. I had to work on cutting it just like 3 inches wide, and then I'm going to be putting some seams and gluing these down as well. So again, more pain, but it's just something I had to do. And I ended up liking the way it looked here, and it's nice and finished. And here's just a quick time lapse, just kind of give you an idea of what you're in for. So you can see I'm using the, like I mentioned before, putting them every foot, and then I was doing them every 4 inches or so. Sorry for this dark here, but it was really hot out, and so I had my umbrella laying over here just so I was sitting in the shade. But so again, it's 4 to 6 inches on the edge, and then in the field or kind of the open area is every 12 inches. So you can imagine how much this took. I actually ordered 500 nails. I thought I'd estimate correctly, and I was like 200 short. So just this area of, I think I had like 270 square feet. I ended up using 700 nails. So you can imagine, just kind of imagine how much it takes. It's pretty annoying, especially just putting them in there and then having to pull the blades back and kind of, tap them in by hand. You just can't do it with a gun or anything. And here's just kind of a visual, give you another view of what it looks like. Doing them every 4 inches, you can see there's just a ton of them. And then if you can see them, it's a little bit hard to see, but every 12 inches in the middle there. So it was a lot of nails and a lot of nailing. So just get yourself a podcast, get some music on, and just kind of tune out and kind of work on it. But here's the edges, or I'm sorry, the seams as I was waiting, they're finally dry. So there's a special tape that, and I'll link for that. And then there's a special glue that you put on top of it. And then this has a shiny side, you can see like this, that goes down, and there's kind of a rough side that goes up. So I already pre-cut this one here because I had to go over this drain. It's pretty simple. It's not really that difficult. It's really just going back and forth with these. And this one's actually, I think they called it the pro version of it's pro, but it's 12 inches wide because I just wanted to have a nice good connection so that the seams do not pull apart. So it's really pretty simple. Just lay it down and then glue it on top, and then make sure you have there's kind of the way the grass lays. Just make sure you have it correct. So now I have to go back and do all these little pieces, which are again very tedious and annoying. But just again, I was just making sure. So the grass is actually the way the blades are sitting is back and to the right, and so I'm just working that way so that I can lay the piece over so that it sits on top. And you want to make sure you don't get any of the blades down into the glue or anything like that, just because you don't want any visible seams or any glue showing on it or anything like that. But this is again some more tedious work, but I like the way it came out. It turned out looking nice, especially around these concrete pavers that I put down. So again, this was more of these little 3-inch seams everywhere. I was trying to figure out, make sure I'd had I couldn't remember where was the last piece. I had just enough to finish this. And here's kind of a visual just showing there's the seam. So it has to dry for 24 hours. So I had to leave that overnight and then, work on other pieces. And then I'm using a bit of nails here. And then this is kind of I think it's going to be a high traffic area. So I didn't do it on any of the other ones, but I did it on here. I used put in some staples as well, just to give it a little bit stronger hold. The staples were a lot more difficult than the nails to put down because it's the same thing. You got to hold the blades back, and then so that they're not pulling it down and nail down the staple without getting any of the blades, because then it would be really visible. And here's another visual just to kind of see I was laying out all the nails that I had to put in here. So I already have them 12 inches on the edge, but I was laying these out just so you can see how many I had to put just on this edge here. And then these are other ones that are going to be going every 4 inches, and I have a seam there I had to do. Again, more visuals just to kind of, I can't reiterate this enough. There's a lot of nailing to do, and it's very tedious. But so I ended up doing, I think, over like 3 days or something, just pieces at a time. And so once you get it all nailed down, you'll notice that it was kind of laid down. So what you want to do is kind of work it back up and get it, the blades kind of straight up. So I have this turf brush that didn't work very well. You can use a strong bristle brush. And the same thing, I'm pulling against the grain because I'm kind of trying to stand them up. Just before I put, there's later going to put some sand, but you just want them they look a lot nicer. So got rid of that one as well. What I ended up getting was this power brush attachment for my ego. You can rent these power brushes as well, but it made a huge difference. This is that worked a lot better. I mean, it's strong, and I had to kind of fight against it. But what it's doing is pushing those blades up against, again, because they've been sitting there in a roll flat. Yeah, I'm doing much better here. And so the blades were laying over, so you want to kind of work them up and kind of, this is what makes a huge difference. And visually, you can tell, as you're seeing it, it looks a lot better. And then the next piece is to work on the sand. And so what this does is it adds some weight to keep the turf down, but what it also does is it works its way down into the bottom, and it helps keep the blades of grass up. I had a problem here because my sand was wet, so it's kind of not working as well. But what I found was the easiest was just to kind of use this turf brush and kind of work it in a little bit. In the back, when I first tried out with the power brush and I put it into those piles, and it was just throwing the sand everywhere and making a giant mess. It still makes a mess, but I was able to work it a little bit better. And so you want to do, they say, about 1 pound to 2 pounds per square foot. That's how much sand you want to put. Probably can't, I don't know if you can see in the video here, but it's just shooting this everywhere, and it was going in the pool, going along the edges. Just, I thought this was going to be easy, but it was a lot harder than I expected, or just a bigger mess than I expected. Just trying to get that sand, working it down into the grains or the blades of grass. But eventually they kind of cleaned it up. But this helps, again, make it look a lot nicer. And then here's the final product. So I was able to get this done, overcome the drain issues and everything like that. But it's way better than it was, and it looks real nice. And it's a lot easy. Obviously, nothing as much to maintain other than kind of cleaning it up with that brush every once in a while. And it's just kind of showing you, what it looked like before with all the weeds and just the mess. And then I would try to cut this, and it would go all in the pool. So obviously, this is much better. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it a little bit, but I graded everything towards those drains. So you just got to make sure you're working on, however it is in your situation, you want to grade the ground away so that it's not sitting there in pools, especially if you're having issues with drainage. So you can see the edges look pretty nice. They kind of rolled over, I mentioned there. I had so many curves. So hopefully in your project you don't have this many curves, because it adds a lot of time. And it just kind of another visual here, what it looked like before. Is obviously it was terrible, and I was just waiting to put this turf, but I had some issues and I had to wait like a year. So but I got it done. We like it. It looks a lot better, obviously, than it was.